did this! You unleashed whatever is in there! I told you to stay away! I didn't do anything! It's coming from the cabin itself. We need to figure out what that light means.
My name is Lucas Hale, and all my life, there was one rule in my family no one ever questioned. Never open grandfather's cabin. Not visit it. Not look inside it. Not even step on its old porch. It sat deep in the Texas brush, 5 miles from the nearest paved road, sealed shut since 1947. Some people said it was dangerous. Others said it was cursed. My dad always gave the same explanation. Some doors stay closed for a reason, son. For years, I accepted that. Until the day I inherited the land. And learned very quickly that the cabin wasn't just a family secret. It was a battleground. A battleground I never asked for. But let me start at the beginning. 3 months after my dad passed, the county mailed me a thick envelope. Inside was a deed, handwritten notes, and a letter from a law firm that handled my grandfather's will. Per the Hale estate, it read, the cabin, surrounding land, and all structures are now under the sole ownership of Lucas Hale. I stared at the paper for a long time. Nobody in my family had set foot near that place in 76 years. And yet it was now legally mine. And something inside me, curiosity, stubbornness, maybe both, whispered. It's time to see what's inside. I didn't know it yet, but opening that cabin would drag me into the orbit of the most entitled, manipulative man in Willow Bend, Charles Whitlock. A man who believed that whatever he wanted, was automatically his. And he wanted my grandfather's land. Badly. The next morning, I drove out with my dog, Scout. The dirt road was eaten by weeds, the kind that cling to your boots like little burr grenades. The trees were thicker than I remembered, gnarled oaks and briar tangles swallowing the trail. Then the cabin came into view. A squat log structure with boarded windows, a tin roof rusted to the color of dried blood, and a heavy iron lock the size of my fist bolted across the door. It looked less abandoned and more protected. I climbed the steps and brushed dirt off a wooden sign nailed to the frame. Do not open. Ever. The word ever was underlined twice. I couldn't believe what he wrote next. Below it, in faded marker. For your own safety. Trust me. My grandfather was many things, stern, quiet, old-school Texan, but he was not dramatic. If he wrote that, he meant it. I took a deep breath. All right, Gramps, I whispered. What were you hiding? Before I could pull out my tools, a voice barked behind me. What do you think you're doing? I turned. A tall, broad man in a bright polo and loafers marched toward me like he owned the world. Silver-streaked hair, perfect tan, and the kind of expression that said rules applied to everyone except him. Charles Whitlock. Local businessman. Land developer. Professional jerk. And apparently, self-appointed sheriff of property he didn't own. I'd seen him at community meetings before, always complaining about noise, zoning, traffic, anything that didn't benefit him personally. Morning, I said cautiously. Just inspecting my property. He scoffed. This isn't your property. Actually, I said, pulling out the deed, it is now. His jaw tightened the second he saw the paper. He didn't even read it. I don't care what a piece of paper says. This cabin should not be opened. Ever. I frowned. Why? What do you know about it? He hesitated, just enough to make my skin crawl. Then he jabbed a finger at the door. Some things are meant to stay buried. This cabin is one of them. Do not open it. I laughed nervously. Are you threatening me? He stepped closer, and his voice dropped low. I'm warning you. That's when I knew something was off. Charles wasn't scared of the cabin. He was scared of me discovering it. And suddenly, his anger made perfect sense. He wanted the land. Badly enough to scare me away. Badly enough to lie. Badly enough to act like he had authority. I stared him down. "I'm opening it." He glared at me, his cheeks twitching. "You'll regret that," he hissed, before storming off. Maybe I should have taken the hint. But my grandfather's warning, Charles's obsession, and the locked cabin all pointed to one truth. Something inside that cabin mattered. A lot. The next day, I came back with crowbars, bolt cutters, and a heavy flashlight. And as Scout paced behind me nervously, I sliced through the lock. The door groaned open, coughing dust into the air. Inside? Nothing like I expected. No ghosts. No treasure. No crime scene. Just a workshop. Old radios. Blueprints. Stacks of journals. Strange devices with dials and copper wiring. A map of Willow Bend, hand-drawn, with big red X's across several plots of land. Most of them belonged to Charles Whitlock. I whispered, "What in the world?" Then I found the journal titled, "Project Sentinel, Keep Safe at All Costs." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were sketches of machines that looked like early detection devices, radiation sensors, seismic monitors, geophones. My grandfather had worked in early military engineering, but this was secret. And dangerous. One entry made my stomach turn. The Whitlock family must never get access to this technology. They've tried twice. They cannot be trusted. I froze. Whitlock. The same last name. Was that why Charles wanted the land? Was the cabin hiding something his family had chased for generations? Before I could read further, Scout growled. Footsteps outside. I quietly blew out my breath. I couldn't believe what he said next. Charles's voice boomed. "Lucas. Come out now. We need to talk." I hid the journal under my shirt and stepped outside. Charles stood there with 3 other men, broad, muscular, matching uniforms. Security contractors. "Lucas," he said, smiling thinly, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we negotiate?" "Negotiate what?" "The land." He shrugged casually. "I'm willing to offer you $10,000. Cash. Today." I blinked. "This land is worth well over $500,000. He smiled wider. "Right. But the cabin reduces the value." My fists clenched. "I'm not selling." His face hardened instantly. "That's a mistake." He nodded at his men, and they moved toward the cabin. My heart stopped. They were going to take it. Forcefully. That's when I knew I had to fight back. I drove straight to the county records office. I spent 6 hours digging into everything I could find on the Whitlocks. And what I found made my blood run cold. Charles's grandfather was investigated in the 1940s for attempting to steal military prototypes from local engineers, including mine. Multiple attempts. Multiple threats. And then a conflict between Charles's grandfather and mine. It ended with a sealed agreement, and the cabin's lock installed. My grandfather didn't lock the cabin because he feared what was inside. He locked it because he feared who would come for it. When I showed the files to the county sheriff, he raised an eyebrow. "Looks like Mr. Whitlock's been lying for a long, long time. You think he's trying to get access to my grandfather's tech?" I asked. The sheriff sighed. "I think Charles wants whatever he believes his grandfather deserved decades ago. And the cabin is the key." Sheriff Turner leaned forward. "Lucas, don't go home alone tonight." But I didn't listen. I went home anyway. And sure enough. At 2 a.m., Scout growled and paced toward the window. Then. Crash. Glass shattered in the living room. 3 figures stepped inside. I recognized their silhouettes immediately. Whitlock's men. They searched the house in silence, organized, trained, efficient. They weren't here to hurt me. They were looking for the journal. The evidence. The key to whatever secret my grandfather had left. I slipped out the back door, sprinted into the brush, and called the sheriff. Turner and his deputies arrived within minutes, catching all 3 men before they escaped. Whitlock wasn't with them. But he didn't need to be. He showed up the next morning, furious, red-faced, spit flying. "You liar. You framed me." "What? You planted that journal. Those documents. That is not my family's history." I raised an eyebrow. "I never told you what was in the journal." The blood drained from his face. And for the first time ever. He looked scared. Charles lawyered up fast. I expected a short hearing. Instead, it turned into a full-blown legal war. He claimed the cabin contained sensitive materials that rightfully belonged to his family. He claimed my grandfather stole military secrets. He claimed the cabin was built illegally. He even claimed I forged the deed. But Rachel Voss, my attorney, destroyed him. She presented certified military records. The sealed agreement from 1947. The original land grant. Proof of the break-in. Witness accounts. Audio from the cabin confrontation. And finally, the journal. When the judge read my grandfather's words about the Whitlocks, he went still. When the sheriff testified about the break-in, he shook his head. When Charles tried to claim it was all a setup, the judge slammed the gavel. "Mr. Whitlock," the judge said, "you knowingly trespassed, attempted to coerce a property owner, and organized a break-in. You will pay restitution, legal fees, and are barred from approaching the Hale property indefinitely." Then he turned to me. "Mr. Hale. The cabin, the land, and all contained property are legally and solely yours. This court acknowledges your grandfather's protective actions were justified." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Charles exploded, screaming, pointing, red as a boiled crawfish, but the bailiff escorted him out. That was the day the Whitlock legacy of entitlement finally snapped. Poetic justice. Delivered in full, the cabin is restored now. I kept the old workshop, preserved the journals, and donated the non-sensitive equipment to a local museum. But the biggest surprise? My grandfather's devices. They still work. I've been using them to track wildlife migrations across the county, exactly the kind of thing he'd have loved. As for Charles, he moved 2 towns over, avoiding anyone with the last name Hale like we carry the plague. People still whisper about the trial at diners and feed stores. How in the world did he think he'd get away with that? And my answer is always the same. When someone wants something badly enough, they convince themselves it already belongs to them. If there's one thing I learned from this whole ordeal, it's this. You can't always control who comes after what's yours. But you can control how you defend it. Stand your ground. Know your rights. And when someone tries to rewrite your family's history, fight back with the truth. Because the truth, it's stronger than any lock.